Guys do not check in with each other very much. Guys just don't do that, whereas women will check in with each other a lot more. So we have to force each other to do that, and that will go a long way to reducing the potential for virtual work to lead to more politics.
The anecdote is assume positive intent, which is actually not helpful. Like, of course, we should assume positive intent. The thing that actually works better is let's talk more. It's not just assuming positive intent. It's actually we need volume and repetitions to create that level of proactive trust.
Welcome to At the Table, the podcast that lives at the intersection between culture, organizational health, leadership, and teamwork. I'm Pat Lencioni, your host, joined by my regular, trusty, very reliable co-host, Cody Thompson. How you doing, Cody?
Doing great, Pat. Happy to be back.
Yes, that's right. You were at Disneyland for a number of days, and you reminded Matthew it was not a vacation.
It was a trip.
Yeah, that's great. What are we going to talk about today, Cody?
Virtual politics.
That's right. Virtual politics. Now, we were a little concerned about doing this episode because it sounds like something we've talked about many times before. And in fact, it's going to be a theme that we've addressed, but it needs to really be understood. And we've lived through that here. And virtual politics refers to the idea of politics in the workplace is exacerbated and is much bigger of a challenge when we're not working together in the same location. And so we've talked to Cody about the difficulty of not being co-located and the disadvantage of all that. But we are increasingly not co-located because of the California diaspora that's happened. And so we have people all over the place. And we have found that it is so much easier for really good people to experience politics that is not part of their nature simply because they're not together. And we want to talk about that. We want to scare people and warn people. If you think that working remotely does not carry with it a high risk of encountering politics, then that can be a dangerous thing.
Yeah, and Pat, like you kind of alluded to this, we sort of closed the book on the virtual work, our opinion on virtual work. That hasn't changed. But a lot of people talk about it as it relates to like productivity, right? Like, oh, what are the merits of this? And can we get more done? And what are the outputs? And are people really doing that? And that's not what this is about. What this is about is like in the way that we talk about teamwork and trust building and the ways that we form cultures and teams, what makes this even harder? And so this idea of like, we are constantly, when we're in organizations, we're talking about how do we minimize politics? And what we're finding over and over and over again is the fact that virtual non-co-located teams are more prone to politics in ways that we were not prone to when we were together.
Yeah. There's just something about being together that allows you to kind of burn off the potential, the substance that's sitting there, and it doesn't develop into something worse. But when you're apart, it becomes a lot more common. And to put a little actual leaves on this tree, we had a situation here in our office, and I like to use real situations to demonstrate these things and illustrate them. And I don't want to use people's names at our company because Alan, Joel, and Joe would not appreciate that. So we're going to keep it anonymous. But we had three people in two different locations working on similar projects. And these are some of the most kind-hearted, trustworthy, trusting, and pure-hearted people that you'd ever meet.
Absolutely.
And Cody, you actually work in one place and I work in the other. So we got to see it from the backside a little bit, and they never got nasty or overtly political. But we saw that when there was confusion about things and it was a little hard to understand, and it doesn't matter how many Zoom calls you have, the stuff that goes on when you're not talking to each other, you start to wonder, like, why are they doing that? Is there something else here? And that's what's so interesting is when there's a vacuum of information, it's very common for people to start to fill it in with potentially negative things and think, oh, maybe there's something going on here that might be kind of negative. Even if your predisposition is positive, even if there's real trust, sometimes when there's frustration or lack of clarity, we will jump to assume the negative.
Yeah, and I think that's the thread we were kind of wanting to pull on here, Pat, is the idea that like trust building is so proactive. Like, and when we're face to face, it's activity and relationship, and you're making deposits into this trust account. And then in the virtual world, and you and I have even experienced this aside from like Joe and Joel and Alan, but the idea that like we're running around, we have busy days. And a standard, very common thing for people to think is like, I can't see you. When we were in the same office and I could see you in your glass, see you through the glass of your office, knowing you're on a podcast, or you're taking calls, or you're consulting a client, that's really easy to assume a positive, oh, Pat's busy.
Yes.
And then when we're away from each other in a virtual environment where we don't have that visual component to it or that relational component to it, it is so easy for us to fill it in with, well, I wonder what he's doing over there. Or
Yeah.
are their intentions good? Or, are they as busy as we are? And then it starts to create this narrative that, oh man, so a little bit of divisiveness or space in between those relationships.
The crazy thing about that, it makes us feel guilty that we do that, but it is human nature. It's the fall of human beings, that we tend to do that. And then we feel bad about it. And then things just kind of get sideways. But you and I have worked together a long time, Cody, and we've gone through things together and tested trust and rebuilt it. Even still, and it's so crazy to think that even still we can sometimes wonder. And it's not like I think you're out golfing every day because we're not in the same office, but it's like, what is going on? And here's the other thing. I liked how you said it's proactive trust, but the number of times when, if we were in the same office, I'd have just walked over to talk to you about something.
Yep.
Now I don't do that. I don't go, I'm going to call Cody really fast because I'm like, oh, he's probably busy and he's probably doing something. I can't interrupt him. And so there's so many little incidental moments that would have helped us reinforce trust that we don't do, that it's natural that it might get questioned.
And, even as we're having this conversation, recorded, we've had a version of this many times, you and I, just trying to figure out, like, so what is the anecdote? Because I think like it would be really easy for people to say, oh, the anecdote is assume positive intent or something like that, which
Right.
is actually not helpful and maybe even harder and not as productive as, like, of course, we should assume positive intent. That's like a base level. Hey,
Yeah.
as opposed to saying their intentions are bad, let's assume their intentions are good. But actually, I think the thing that you and I have talked about that actually works better is like volume. Like it's
Yes.
just like, let's talk more. Even if we
Yes.
talk for 30 seconds on a call, I think about it when you have a close friend or relationship, right? They're the type of friends that you say like, oh, even if we go months without talking, we pick up right where we left off. Well,
Right.
that's great, but it's actually better to say, I had a friend that I called almost every day that as I was driving into work. And some of those conversations were like, hey, how's it going? Oh, it's good. I'm a little busy right now. 30 seconds and we had jumped off the phone. That 30 seconds is better than just assuming like we're going to pick up right where we left off. And I think what we're saying in the work relationship sentiment is it's not just assuming positive intent. It's actually we need volume and repetitions to create that level of proactive trust.
Yeah, and it kind of relates to a podcast we did recently where we talked about if you trust somebody, it doesn't mean, oh, I'm not going to ask him a question
Right, right.
about something. It's like, well, hey, what did you mean by that? Even if they're probably going to tell you something that helps you, you should still ask the question. And I just thought of something as we were talking, Cody, about the difference between men and women in regard to this. And that is guys do not check in with each other very much like women
Mm-hmm.
do with their friends, guys to guys. And then you're right, they see each other. I was with a guy that I hadn't seen in like 9 years recently. We were making references to things that we had said 9.5 years ago. We're
Yeah.
like, hey, remember when you were telling me about that thing? And people would have thought, so were you together last week? No, it was 9 years ago, literally.
Mm-hmm.
And guys just don't do that as much. And whereas women will, and the women in our office that are remote, they'll check in with each other a lot more. And they'll have those conversations where I think, and you and I, Cody, are like this too. You and I are committed to actually picking up the phone and call. We're actually putting structure in place to making sure that we will call each other when we're both free.
Yeah.
So we're going to have people in our offices go, hey, call Pat. He's free right now. Just talk. So we have to force each other to do that. And that will go a long way to reducing the potential for virtual work to lead to more politics.
Yeah, it's funny. We tried a variety of different things because I think this topic has come up for us in one way or another. Because we're more virtual than we've ever been, and we're noticing that it can erode trust faster. Like it's harder to build trust. It's so hard to get on a Zoom screen and say there's this like desire to be really efficient with our time when we're on
Yes.
Zoom, and so we're like, oh, rather than say, we spent 12 minutes before we ever started talking about the podcast topic, asking about my vacation and, what it was like with the kids at Disneyland. That doesn't always happen on Zoom. It
No.
can happen when you're getting coffee in the morning if we're both in the same office. And so it's just that, like, those little, you know, the fabric of the relationship is just a lot thinner when you're virtual. And so you have even suggested, like, I'm glad we're not doing this for a variety of reasons, but you're like, I wish we had cameras in each other's office so I could see when you're not busy. The same way we're trying to replicate if I were to look through the glass in your office if we were co-located. But there is something here about, like, we assume, you and I, is if I just assume you're busy, so I don't call. And
Right.
what it does is it erodes, and then it can even spiral or snowball into, well, I wonder what he's doing, and is he as busy as I am, or are we on the same page about this, or he's had another conversation since our last meeting that took our idea in a different direction. What were his intentions there? All of that
Right.
gets solved in a very organic way when you're in the office, and it becomes increasingly harder when you're remote.
Today, Cody, when we got on the call, I purposefully said something. I don't know if you noticed it, but I said, okay, we're going to do a podcast today. And we need to do some pre-conversation. But before we said anything, I said, let's have some fun,
Yeah,
because it's so easy to get on this and have everybody think, oh, I'm wasting your time. And we don't want to waste any time. And that whole idea of efficiency versus effectiveness, taking the time to check in with each other, to waste some time in relationship, is actually good and goes a long way toward reducing the potential for politics. And boy, Zoom makes it hard because we want to get off Zoom calls.
yeah,
I mean, it's like something about ending a Zoom call makes us feel like we can dance. And yet, we got to learn to waste time, because when we work together in an office, we waste time and we enjoy it.
yeah,
And I really mean that. It sounds like wasting time. Now, Cody, there's something I want to. There's a concept. Tracy and I have been talking about this for years. We learned it from some other folks, and it's called the ladder of inference. And that's where
mhm,
politics comes from. The ladder of inference. Imagine two people standing on two different ladders or on different sides. And once one person makes an inference about what the other person's intention is, they step up to the next rung. And so now they're operating from an assumption like, oh, that person is trying to usurp some of my authority, or they're trying to do something that because they think they're better at it. It's not accurate, but that's the inference. And the other person senses that, and then they step up the ladder of inference. And pretty
yeah,
soon you're going like this, and both people are operating at this really dangerous high level built on inference, and they both have to come all the way down and put their feet firmly on the ground in order to get over all of that. And when you're virtual, it's really hard to come down the ladder of inference, because you have to climb down intentionally and call out, like, hey, I assumed this. Did you assume anything? Yeah, I was assuming
yeah,
this. Oh, as a result of that, I assumed this. And you get back down to your feet on the ground and you're like, oh, we're back. We're
yeah.
back to our place of trust. So that ladder of inference is so much easier to climb when there's not visual, incidental, ongoing contact.
Yeah, and I think I 100% agree, and I think the other element that is really important is just we put trust at the foundation of teamwork, right? And I think what we're noticing is this whole virtual environment, it goes, we have vulnerability based trust so that we can have good ideological conflicts, so that we can make commitments, so that we can hold each other accountable, so that we can get to results. And it feels like the virtual environment, more people are really willing to only talk about the first or the top two pieces of the pyramid, which is like, are we getting the results we want? If
Yeah,
not, who do we hold accountable?
right.
And they're kind of doing away with the trust building and the conflict and all of that stuff. And to go all the way down the pyramid, to get off the ladder and actually undo politics, you have to build trust. And so it's not just about, like, how do we get results, and if not, who's responsible. You really have to go all the way down to trust. And I think that's sort of the concept here is we've constantly emphasized that with teams that are together. It's hard enough when you're in the same building. It's hard enough when you're walking to the same parking lot. It gets increasingly hard when you're jumping off Zoom screens and you're working in different locations.
Yeah. Let me put an end to the little example I used before of those three fictional characters whose names will not be mentioned. They were together last week. So Alan is great about coming out, and Alan's an extrovert and he wants to be with the people he works with. It was so fun to know that they were having these subtle ladder of inference things. They were never nasty about it because they're wonderful people, but they were like, what's going on here? And they got in a room together, and in like a couple of hours in rolling up their sleeves and working together, to watch the trust get restored was really something. It was amazing to watch these people and how they were partnering together and helping each other and acknowledging the different perspectives they had. But it really felt like it took being in the same room.
Hmm.
And you know, I'm sure there's psychologists out there and researchers that could show what it is about human beings being together. You know, I do know they walk in the room, they give each other a hug, and they do spend more time talking about their personal lives. And there's just something about seeing somebody in 3 dimensions that is just different than this right here. And
So
so,
I would ask this, Pat, like, so if somebody's listening to this and they say, I'm feeling this, like I feel that there's virtual, it's harder to undo these politics. It's a little harder to build trust. Obviously, one recommendation, get in the room. What else should people listening to this do?
well, and I want to go back to the get in the room together, because when you try to calculate the cost and the benefit of that, you're going to go, it costs money to fly. It's a pain because somebody has to be away from their home and their family. And then you start to calculate the benefit by the specific project that you're working on.
Yeah.
And then you think, we could do that on Zoom. And we never calculate the human benefits of being in the room and reestablishing and reminding ourselves of that trust. It's so easy not to, it's one of those things, it's like an intangible that'll never make it on a spreadsheet, but it's so real. So I would say is change your economic and financial analysis of traveling to be together and
Yeah.
recognize there's real goodness that you need to have. The other thing I would just say is, I'm going to go back to our last podcast, which is ask difficult questions. When you are on Zoom, go, hey, you know, I love you, man. What did you mean by this? Because it's really for me to make the wrong inference. And I know I'm probably wrong. So I want to ask the question and wade into that discomfort. As we say, if it's not a little uncomfortable, then it's not like that productive kind of conflict that's necessary to keep trust alive.
Yeah. And then I think the volume thing is also at play.
Oh,
Like, just
yeah.
when in doubt, pick up the phone, call. I
Yeah.
love ask difficult questions, but the more often you're talking, the better.
Yeah. And when you're on your way home in the car, call your friend
Hmm.
and call your colleague and just check in. And you know what's going to happen is you're going to call in and just say, hey, just wanted to check in and see how you're doing. That goes a long way toward reducing the potential for the ladder of inference. Something else will come up. Oh, by the way, I talked to so-and-so, and then something good happens. So many of the good things that have happened at the table group over the last 30 years have been when we were talking in between things. And since
Yeah.
you don't have those in between things, make it your commute. So stop listening to podcasts in the car, except for this one. No, I mean, but think about calling somebody and just checking in with them.
I love it.
All righty. So that's it.